In the part 1 video I talked about the ratio between the wingtip line, the wingtip distance between one wingtip and another, and the distance or length of the bow. And it's about 0.9 ratio. In other words, if you took whatever bow length you have, this one is 25 inches, multiply it times 0.9 or 0.89 or 0.91 or 2, it's not very critical, but in that range, you will come up with the wingtip to wingtip dimension. So if you have a bow that you want to use for, let's say, a stronger wind kite, you're going to have a shorter bow and maybe a larger diameter bow in addition. And let's say that's 24 inches instead of 25 inches. You simply multiply the 24 times 0.9 and you get the distance to create your new kite wingtip points. And these are the critical points of the kite design. Then you just put in the middle of the wingtip line a 90-degree line for the spine. And then you can add the flaps however you want them. These are about 3/4 of an inch and taper down a little bit and about 5 inches long. And that does a good job. There are a couple of things you can do with this kite though that can actually enhance its performance. And one of them is to put about a 1/2 inch strip of tape right along the leading edge of the kite from the nose all the way to the wingtip on both sides. What this does is it stiffens the leading edge a little bit, and that adds to the performance of the kite. As simple as that is. Another thing you can do is, and I often do this, is I use a carbon fiber rod, but it could be anything really, bamboo split or a stirring straw that's stiff, lightweight, something lightweight but stiff, and I put it parallel to the spine, somewhere on the trailing edge here, usually between 4 and 5 inches away from the spine. It's not critical, but what it does is it minimizes the amount of fluttering that occurs on the trailing edge of the kite. That makes the kite fly more quietly, and it increases slightly the forward speed of the kite. Also very simple to do, not complicated. Now for the spine material, I use either bamboo, which is what this is, or I use carbon fiber, a rod, or a piece of flat carbon fiber. Doesn't matter. Either way, flat carbon fiber like this, or a rod. If you're using a carbon fiber rod, I suggest, in order to get the bend in the kite, in the spine of the kite, to get about 1.5 inch, maybe 2 inch long piece of aluminum tubing that has an inside diameter large enough to allow your bow, or your spine rod to slide through it. And then once that's on, you slide it up about halfway between the wingtip line where it crosses the spine and where the bow crosses the spine. Right in here, you make the bend. and you put a bend in it so that when the tail of the kite is flat on the table, the nose raises up about 3/4 of an inch or thereabouts. It's a relatively shallow bend. The amount can be adjusted with that aluminum tubing, and you can experiment with what you like best. The sail material can be many, many things. From some kite makers use the plastic shopping bags that stores provide. Those often are quite stretchy, and as a result aren't quite as good for a fighter kite. I use plastic films such as this, which is called cellophane. I buy it from papermart.com, and it comes in a variety of colors. It's translucent, very lightweight, very durable, very strong. And I also use opaque ones. This one happens to be silver on one side and red on the other. And I also buy this from papermart.com. And you can find all kinds of plastic gift wrapping materials, and that's what basically these are. Different patterns and so on, that probably at any store that sells a decent supply of gift wrap would have a variety of them. Or maybe a craft store would be a good place, like Michael's or some similar store. And when I make the kite sail, depending on what material I use either an X-Acto knife or a utility knife to just cut around the template that I made. But when I use synthetic materials like the plastic films that I typically use, I always hot cut them. Now, hot cutting is simply using a soldering iron. This is a battery-powered rechargeable soldering iron I bought from Amazon for, I forget, less than $20, I believe. And it heats up quickly, and I can cut several different sails with it before it needs charging again. But the tip heats up, and I use glass to cut it on. I don't use a cutting mat because the soldering iron would melt the cutting mat. But what this does is it melts rather than cuts. It melts the plastic film along the edge. And when it does, some of the melted material from the plastic adheres to the edge and strengthens the edge. And this is really valuable, especially along the trailing edge of any kite. I hot cut the whole thing. It's quite quick, easy, but it does add a benefit to the longevity, durability of the kite sail, or at least that's what I've experienced. Now, making a kite of any size using these ratios can allow you to fit really quite well the kite you're flying to the wind speed that you want to fly it in. It'll take a little experimenting to find out how, for example, a 1.5 meter or 1.5 millimeter, not meter, 1.5 millimeter diameter bow, how that feels to you when you're flying it in the winds that you fly in. And if it feels very slow and sluggish and a little bit too flexible, you may want to use a .06 diameter carbon fiber rod in the same kite, or make a kite using the same bow material but shorten the bow. Instead of being 25 inches like this one is, I would make it 24 inches. And 24 inches long times 0.9 gives me the wingtip distance from wingtip to wingtip. So I keep the same ratio and can make any sized kite. And once I do that, I put the 24-inch bow in, fly it in the winds that I have available, and see how I like it compared to the other one. And you'll discover that there are certain bow diameters and bow lengths and kite sail sizes that you really will prefer. But it will take a little bit of experimenting and making several kites in order to really get a feel for it. And it's the feeling of it that's the most important. All this other stuff, no matter what I say or anyone else says about how a kite flies and how fast it is and how well it maneuvers, that's all really unusable information. You need to experience it yourself to make it usable for you. That was what I learned when I started flying fighter kites. I learned that what someone else says doesn't always apply to me. And I found out through experimentation, just like I'm telling you about here, what works best for me. And that's what I love. You will find the same thing.